Hey everyone, today we're going to do something a little bit different. So a big part of a successful game is not driving away newcomers but having a really weak introduction experience. With WoW being in a lull and me trying out some other games and giving my first impressions of them, I got to thinking, well, how would World of Warcraft hold up to the same kind of treatment? Well, me actually doing that would be pointless. I already know the game like the back of my hand, but I can make some observations. First of all, the literal first steps of the games. With WoW, you kind of get a slow pan through the world and some supporting dialogue from that guy with the really good voice whose name I don't know. It establishes where you are and what you're doing, and I think that's quite effective. Immediately after, you are in a quest flow that's simple enough and it's slow-paced. It's relaxed, and I think that's a definite good introduction to the game that emphasizes Blizzard's, I think, main strength, and that is the zones themselves and the world overall. WildStar... well, WildStar is a clusterfuck. You get a muddled, kind of linear questline through an arc ship, then you're just dumped on a planet, the text delivery's rubbish, and overall, it is a far less effective job than what World of Warcraft does. However, its gameplay is pretty great. Star Wars: The Old Republic, though, comes off very well. Right after character creation, you get right into dialogue with the main character of your class's storyline. Now that's got dialogue options that are overall pretty well written and delivered. The quality of the areas in SWTOR is a little bit more weak on first impressions in comparison to WoW, so it really is the story content that keeps you going. If you start off on Hutta, then I think you might be a bit disappointed, but Korriban is certainly a lot more interesting, and if you play the Republic, then, I mean, just get out. Anyway, WoW's overall first steps are actually quite good. While it may not blow people away visually, I think it is a well-timed and well-paced introduction to the world. Where World of Warcraft runs into problems, though, is after the immediate first steps. The largest thing I noticed is how World of Warcraft introduces abilities so slowly. By the time I was level 14 in WildStar, I had all of my abilities unlocked and a host of things to choose from. Star Wars: The Old Republic also dished out abilities far quicker than World of Warcraft does. In those games, you get this feeling like you've got a lot to choose from, and you're really progressing through your character's ability set, whereas in World of Warcraft, you get that feeling where you look at your ability book, and you see that you won't have another useful rotational ability for 8 or even more levels. This progression feels far more fun in other games, and really just having such a small toolkit, I think really limits a lot of the quality of the gameplay in World of Warcraft. WoW is also far easier than either of the other games that I've tried, to the point of absolute utter absurdity. Being MMOs, they all have decently easy sort of starting experiences, but at least death is a possibility in the other ones. What worries me is that the combination of enemies dying super quickly and you having hardly many abilities is going to make WoW just look like it's a game that's lacking in difficulty or depth. I get the companies don't want to drive off customers, potential customers anyway, by having a learning cliff, but WoW is simply taking the piss in that regard. The immediate gameplay of playing around 12 hours of WildStar or The Old Republic was far more fun, and I felt like I was playing a fully featured class with in-depth mechanics, a bit of a rotation, and that I was trying to overcome a challenge. In World of Warcraft, it's a case of run up to a mob, hit 2 and 3 buttons, it dies, move on. It's just dull, and it's not interesting at all. Next, we've got questing. So, WoW is a bit strange in this regard. Its overt storytelling isn't really that good, but I think it does a very good job of building up atmosphere. This does vary slightly by race, with the likes of, say, the Worgen and the Undead coming off fantastically. MMOs are generally a slow burn, so I can see with WoW people getting into a good groove with the questing and the strong aesthetic and very good zones. When it comes to making the game area actually feel like a world, I think Blizzard does an absolutely great job, and it certainly does trump both WildStar and The Old Republic for me. The Old Republic is definitely hurt in that it's fragmented into different planets, so it doesn't feel as cohesive. I know it's in the same universe and, you know, they obviously have the same aesthetic, but it just isn't as effective as WoW's sort of just big world that you can go and explore. And with WildStar, well, it's pretty, but I didn't find its zone design to be really that special or particularly standout. Of course, like, WoW is going to run into problems on the graphical end, but I think their art style does make up for it, even in some of the older zones, but especially in the newer stuff. The actual questing and storytelling of Star Wars: The Old Republic, at least for the main quest, absolutely nukes both WoW and WildStar into oblivion, with WildStar definitely coming off the worst of the three. Star Wars is just, it's just that good. It really is an MMO that feels like playing a single-player RPG. They've actually redesigned the quest flow to be a little bit different and more focused on the main stories. So essentially the fun that was brought in with their 12 times story quest experience, that's set to continue past the expiration of that particular experience boost. WildStar storytelling is just simply awful in comparison to both Warcraft and Star Wars The Old Republic. They do apparently have better storytelling in the dungeons, but overall, it's not that great when it comes to you just running around zones. The quest flow of WoW is definitely very easy to follow, and it shouldn't really throw up too many issues. WildStar is a bit of a strange game in that regard. It just feels like a fragmented mess of random stuff that doesn't have much cohesion. A lot of the individual activities are certainly fun, and really, I don't like things being super linear, with Wrath being my favorite leveling, so I think it's more that WildStar just isn't well designed. From a first impressions perspective, I can totally see someone getting into the sort of world of, well, Warcraft far more than I can see them getting into the world of WildStar. So overall, really, WoW is doing quite well on the kind of aesthetic front, in terms of how it makes you feel, how it looks, and a few things like that. Even though its graphical fidelity isn't brilliant, it's also got great music. I think some of it's a bit more memorable than the other games, bar obviously the parts of Star Wars that are using, well, the Star Wars music by John Williams. But anyway, WoW really does very poorly when it comes to gameplay, which is really sad because there is plenty going on with WoW's combat at the end game. They just have ended up spreading things out so much that the first, 40 levels feels so dull in comparison to the first 10 levels of the Old Republic or of WildStar. Combined with the ludicrous ease of WoW, I cannot see its gameplay keeping anyone invested. On the dungeon front, I found tours to be pretty meh, and WildStar's to be absolutely brilliant. WoW, again, suffers early on from having poor combat mechanics and absurd levels of ease, so its dungeons, they're going to suffer heavily. The first dungeon of WildStar was packed with simple but very meaningful mechanics. It teaches you about interrupting, standing out of the fire, team coordination, and it even contains some instant kill mechanics. Its telegraph system means that it's very clear when you've made a mistake, so even with a relatively bad group, I found that people learned quickly enough. Its fights were far longer too, and because of that, they felt more like a big challenge. I think on the whole, the dungeon gameplay of WildStar is a cut above the rest and absolutely puts both World of Warcraft and Star Wars to shame. Warcraft, though, definitely doesn't do well in this regard because of the stupid level of ease, and yeah, it's just not a very good experience. I can see someone going into a dungeon in WildStar and coming out really excited. I cannot see that happening for World of Warcraft. So overall, what I think is that Blizzard have simplified the early game too much in terms of the actual gameplay. Mobs die so quick that you can't get a feel for the combat mechanics, and core abilities are so spread out that you don't really get a feel for your class for really far too long. It just feels behind the curve. I get that Blizzard has a real challenge in terms of spreading out the rewards over so many levels, but right now, things just suck in comparison to some other offerings that are out there. Perhaps they could work on compressing the leveling brackets to make a more condensed and story-focused leveling progression that involves a bit more difficulty and players getting abilities faster. Another thing which I suppose the other games do have is they have progression systems that pretty much unlock a new thing every level. Maybe like World of Warcraft's old talent system. As much as I really like aspects of the current talent system in terms of it being kind of very good for swapping out different builds and stuff like that, there is definitely something lost in that you don't constantly get character progression via getting talent points. That definitely is something that I feel when comparing these games. But anyway, they are my overall thoughts on the new player experience of World of Warcraft. I think a lot of people are going to bounce off it because the gameplay is just not that good. It will not impress anyone who has played really any of the modern MMOs that have came out, and with games like Guild Wars 2, WildStar, and Star Wars The Old Republic having pretty big, PR-friendly things going on in and around actually this time of year. If someone then goes and tries a WoW trial, no, I don't think they're going to really stick with it. It's absolutely something I think Blizzard should fix up. Anyway, that's basically it for this video. What I'd really like to know, and this is kind of delving into some of your own personal experience, if any of your friends have tried World of Warcraft, or maybe if you bounced off the game on your first time, what did they think? What did you think? especially what were the first impressions like for the kind of intro experience to World of Warcraft, maybe the first 20 or 30 levels. I'd be really interested to know. Leave that down in the comments, or you can hit me up on Twitter, which is probably the best place to directly get me. But other than that, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.